One of the core tenets of the human experience, a fact of life, is that there were those that came before and there will be those that follow after. No matter if it be by blood or sheer ideas, we are constantly inspired by and inspire others. This trope is well established across almost all of fiction. Whether it be a long-running series wrapping up the story of the main character, transitioning to the next protagonist to create further intrigue, or simply naturally progressing to the next generation as the audience itself shifts and changes with time. Some of the best and my personal favorite characters are bearers of legacies. So in today's video, I figured I'd look at some of the most popular examples of such, focusing on the material itself and determine who among them did it best. Who took the techniques imparted to them and built upon them, redefining or even improving upon the training gifted to them by their masters or teachers. Hey everyone, it's Crisis here, and let's look across some of our favorite franchises to find out who is the greatest successor in all of fiction. Before we get into that though, please feel free to become a member of the channel, showing your support for a small fee. You'll get access to my exclusive Discord server, privated videos that only you will be able to see, and priority in the chat section of future live streams. I think you'll agree that it's worth it. Thank you so much and enjoy. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, this phrase was spoken: pass on what you have learned. Some of the final words said by Grandmaster Yoda to the burgeoning Jedi Luke Skywalker, the son of the Chosen One, pupil to both Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda himself. The responsibility of restoring the Order, all but crushed by Sidious, fell squarely onto his shoulders. I hate to say it, but for the Disney canon, they make a point to show that Luke did indeed fail to succeed the likes of Obi-Wan or Yoda, making many of the same mistakes as the prior Jedi. He too was ultimately undermined by Sidious, either literally or through his proxy Snoke. Having his very nephew warped into Vader's Echo, all of the time spent gathering artifacts and knowledge, finding new students to teach, ended in another Jedi purge. Keep in mind too that the original Order stood for tens of thousands of years before Order 66. Meanwhile, Luke's Order was only around for a couple of decades at best before being destroyed. While Skywalker did fail Ben Solo and the rest of his pupils, being knocked unconscious in a moment of doubt, fleetingly considering killing his own nephew, he did take on another pupil. However, in the words of Yoda, the best lesson that Luke could pass on was the example of his failure. He'd ended up a disgruntled old man, all but seeking to wipe away the remnants of what he saw as a flawed institution, yet reinvigorated by his old teacher's wisdom. He took up a blade to fight one last time, admitting his folly to his nephew, rhyming again with the words of Kenobi to his pupil, Luke Skywalker's own father. Then he sacrificed his life to aid his new apprentice, as well as his sister and her rebellion, ascending to a higher plane. As a Force ghost, the last piece of wisdom given was encouragement to Rey, affirming to her that her genetic link to Palpatine did not define her, granting his own, alongside all Jedi in history, the power Rey needed to destroy the ultimate culmination of dark power. As much as I'd like to argue otherwise, the very narrative of the sequels asserts that Luke objectively failed to surpass or succeed his mentors, specifically in the efforts of maintaining his order and avoiding the pitfalls of the past. As far as we know, he didn't modify the Jedi doctrine, clinging instead to ancient knowledge. Obi-Wan knew he let Anakin down, someone burdened by fear and selfish attachments. Luke himself saw proof that Yoda and Kenobi had been flawed in their assessment of Vader's character, yet he formed and led an order susceptible to starkly similar schemes carried out by essentially the same individual that burned down the old Jedi. Rise of Skywalker acknowledges that Luke was wrong to hide from his duty after his temple fell, that he clung too tight to tradition, that he was not the mentor Ben Solo needed him to be. While there is something there leading by an example of failure, Luke has to learn this from Yoda, the Grand Master he was set up to surpass, and it's yet to be seen if Rey incorporates this knowledge to positive effect. To keep it succinct, and as to not discuss so many variations of the characters here, Luke Skywalker of the expanded universe also endured many pitfalls as a Grand Master. His count of students gone rogue is way higher than his canon counterpart. The body count of wars he faced was off the charts. He even also lost a nephew to the dark side and was exorcised from the galaxy for a little while as well. And while decades after his death, his order still faced a similar near extinction event as Order 66. We can cut them both a little slack though. Carrying the torch of a regime tens of thousands of years old, which had been seeded with bureaucratic folly by a living hive mind of evil, might be the hardest task any of the characters here have had to attempt to live up to. With the son of Goku, the de facto protagonist of Dragon Ball, Gohan, having come back into center stage, what with a new movie and manga arc centered around him, and his unlocking of a new level of power, surpassing his father. Watch this video so you don't go beast yourself if that triggers you. Let's actually see how he performed when given the chance to lead. Unlike many of his kind, Gohan was actually given a chance to take over the series, with its creator Akira Toriyama confirming that after Goku's sacrifice during the Cell Saga, Gohan was intended to take his mantle, later admitting that he simply could not write the character in that position. This has manifested itself in the manga a few ways. For one, Gohan simply did not pay mind to his martial arts training, instead focusing on his career and personal life. Goku and Vegeta, both pure-blood Saiyan warriors, will constantly hone their skills instinctually, even if it means they'll forget their own granddaughter's name. Gohan, despite his latent potential, surpassing his father's entire roughly 24 years of training and adapting to his highly skilled or demonic foes just by getting angry as a toddler, chose not to capitalize on this and push his limits. This put him into sticky situations like having much more trouble against a roughly super perfect Cell level fighter, failing to tap into his monstrous rage and power at will, and being surpassed in power by the likes of the full-blooded Saiyans. This was amended in theory when Gohan's latent potential was finally fully realized by the highest magnitude of deity showcased so far in the series. Being by far the most powerful character at that point in the arc, Gohan could have defeated the villain at the time, Majin Buu, yet his character flaw, showcased when he was nearly 11 years old, resurfaced. Gohan's new power gave way to overconfidence, the same problem which led to Cell becoming a living bomb and requiring Goku's sacrifice in the first place. In both instances, Gohan could have averted his father's death as well as his eventually being absorbed by Buu if he simply went all out and pressed his advantage to the fullest. To his credit though, this is similar to Vegeta's Saiyan trait of pride and arrogance, as well as Goku's tendency to let his guard down. At worst, at this point, I'd say Gohan simply rivals the other two in this manner, which still deducts points since a good successor in this case would have to improve upon what came before as opposed to falling into the same trappings of ego. With Goku given another chance at life by the end of the Buu arc, Gohan especially slacked off after this as he was no longer even theoretically Earth's main defender. However, he would come to learn that his father wouldn't always be there to defend the planet and that it would fall to Gohan to be more powerful than whatever threat it may face. So, as foreshadowed in both the Dragon Ball Super anime and manga, Gohan would train with his original master Piccolo to find a new path to power all his own. His unique Saiyan biology, ushered forth from his rage-born strength, would give way to his form known as Beast. As the current most powerful defender of Earth, yes, you heard me right, again, watch this video, Gohan swiftly dealt with a foe stated to be beyond the capabilities of Goku and Vegeta, and even overpowered his father's strongest state in one-on-one combat. We're in the midst of it right now, so until the manga returns after its current hiatus, it's yet to be seen how long this will last, but everything so far is setting Gohan up for success. His defeat of Cell Max, reawakening as the prodigy he's always known to be, finally realizing his potential beyond his father and his rival, he defended the Earth, amended his arrogance, and currently sits as her greatest defender. Unless he slacks off again or his dad gets a new form. Miles Morales, the second Spider-Man, has probably had his name most heard when it comes to carrying the torch. While his assumption of the Spider Mantle within the likes of film and video games are where this tale is most observed, I'll be presenting what's said of his main narrative, that being the comics, though I will touch on the likes of Spider-Verse and the Insomniac games here and there. From the get-go, within his origin in the Ultimate Marvel series, Miles exists as the next Spider-Man. We see his growth from newly acquiring his powers and choosing not to assist in Peter's, at the time, battle to the death with his villains, mirroring Peter's own failure to save Uncle Ben. Then going on to earn the approval of Nick Fury, Peter's clone, Aunt May, and eventually this world's Peter Parker himself. And as well, the main one too. In the Spider-Men series, the original 616 Peter Parker learns about Miles' succeeding Earth 1610's Peter. They trade blows, fight beside one another, and relate to each other. By the end of this adventure, Peter gives his blessing. Time would pass, with the Peter of Miles' reality returning to life, having his own realization as to Morales' competency and goodwill, trusting him with the web shooters designed by Peter's own father, leaving New York, and by extension the lives of Aunt May and Gwen Stacy, two of Peter's most beloved ones, in Miles' hands. But as dimensions shifted and timelines rearranged, par for the course in comics, Miles would have to contend with the larger narrative of the main Marvel universe, which would become his new home for the foreseeable future. See, the Ultimate line gave Brian Michael Bendis and others the freedom to create a character like Miles, to finish Peter's story and have someone else actually firmly take his place. But no matter how bad his books are, constant retcons, and Paul, they'll never actually bench Peter Parker, not in the main universe. Even when put into a coma, it was Ben Reilly, the first literal Spider-Man clone, to tag in as the wall crawler. For some reason, not Miles. Despite what Peter says about Morales, that he could surpass him one day, the main timeline had its own series of successors before Miles was ever even invented. Mayday Parker, the potential daughter of Peter and Mary Jane, who actually had her own storied career in the Marvel Comics 2 books, as well set in an alternate timeline, is actually the reason the demon Mephisto sought to magically make it so that the two could never settle down. Her potential as a superhero is all that could pose a threat to the demon's future assault on Earth. It doesn't help Miles' case that Spider-Man 2099, always making the kid's job harder, is consistently situated to be the guaranteed bearer of Peter's mantle in the future. Both in the 2099 era, as well as according to the X-Men from the Future Cable, Peter goes on to be the greatest hero of all time. And since it's said over and over that 2099 will happen to the main timeline, Miles simply never lives up to his potential or surpasses the original Spider-Man based on the canon. That being said, whenever we peer into less editorially mandated universes compared to the main books, Miles always shines. Either in Spider-Verse, where he's proven himself time and time again, or the video games where he saves all of New York, calls the shots by the end of the latest one, and was given the right to protect the entire city as his mentor takes time to just be Peter. Since April of 1940, Robin has been synonymous with the term sidekick, being one half of the dynamic duo, and in many ways, he was the first potential successor in comics. Across various books depicting possible futures ever since then, it was just understood that Dick Grayson, the first Robin, was born to take up the mantle of his adopted father. This assumption was even made canon. Dick wanted to and expected that he'd be Batman one day. Bruce Wayne has even said that this was the main reason he recruited the Ward, to fill his shoes when he no longer could. However, as he grew, had his own adventures and trials, Grayson decided he'd rather be his own man. He forged the identity of Nightwing, paying tribute to the world's finest that imparted within him the examples of heroism. The name Nightwing being that of a legendary Kryptonian vigilante, essentially the Batman of Krypton, Nightwing would earn his stripes, leading one of the most famous teams of heroes, protecting his own city until one day the glorious burden of Batman would become his own. Bruce Wayne had been beaten and broken by Bane, trusting the mantle with John Paul Valley in the meantime. This would prove a mistake, as Valley bastardized the cape and cowl to the ends of uber violence. Wayne then knew that his first son, someone who understood all of Batman's methods, was the rightful heir to the title, only choosing John still out of respect for Grayson's need of a unique identity. Still though, once Bruce had wrenched the cape and cowl away from Valley, he allowed himself a period of reflection, and in this time, Richard would have to face his destiny. His first dedicated stint as Batman saw him face his personal demons, fighting beside Tim Drake to defeat some of Gotham's worst, such as Killer Croc and Two-Face, a foe who'd left psychological and literal scars on Grayson since his days as Robin. However, this proved traumatic to Nightwing, someone who had spent his entire adult life trying to avoid this sense of imposter syndrome, feeling like he'd only ever amount to second best. Despite objectively being the only one who could do it, the one Bruce trusted the most, and with Wayne even believing that Dick made for a great Dark Knight, it wasn't what he wanted. Another 14 years worth of comics would go by, with Nightwing further earning Batman's and others' respect. He grew as a leader, the heart of the DC universe, the man at the center that bridged the gaps between teams and generations. Through all that, he still didn't live up to Batman's stature. No, he surpassed it, this being in Wayne's own words. He fought the same kind of evil but maintained his identity. He was just as good of a hero without having to give up on the most human parts of himself. In fact, it's what made him a hero. To make a long story short, Batman would be sent through time, appearing as if he'd passed on. Unlike the first instance, Dick wouldn't just be filling in for Bruce. Wayne wasn't waiting in the wing to retake the mantle. Grayson had to be Batman. Possibly forever. Time and time again he would be tested, and time again he would prove every bit his father's equal. Guidebooks say it, all the best writers said it, Snyder, Morrison, the at the time Justice League of America scribe, even embodiments of the martial arts concepts of yin and yang all agree that Dick Bats is Bruce's equal. In fact, once Bruce returned, Grant Morrison paralleled the two Batmen with a pair of actual bats. The younger one being stronger, faster, smarter, just better, with the older one still just refusing to die off. Bruce would return, however, and ask Grayson to take up his true identity, what he'd refer to as a better Batman. This is just a constant from this point forward. Nightwing is a clear vision of what Batman was meant to be. He's an equal fighter. The Titans he leads are made the premier unit of defenders by the Trinity. His books are outright labeled better than Batman. So, with all of that said, who among these most famous inheritors best earn their title? Unfortunately, as for the case of perhaps cinema's most iconic hero, Luke fell off hard. It simply is the point that Skywalker kind of flopped as a Jedi Master. At best, he did about as well as Yoda or Obi-Wan, letting his student down and watching as his order was destroyed by Sidious. The last hope for him is, again, if we get to see his ghost aiding Rey in rebuilding the order for a third time in as many generations. His Legends counterpart fares better insofar as rebuilding the Jedi, but actually turned out even more apprentices turned Sith adjacent. EU Luke rocks as a character, but he wasn't given many resources and his career was highly tumultuous. Old Ben's ghost, for instance, disappeared before Skywalker even found anyone to really train. He had to start from scratch. Still though, his teachings may live on through Rey and certainly do in Cade Skywalker as far as the Legends timeline is concerned. Likewise for Gohan, he had his chance to step up and fumbled. He slacked off, and once he regained his supreme power, he still failed to surpass the trappings of his predecessor. His stocks are up for now, so if he keeps training and maintains his greater than Goku level potential, it's entirely possible that the series could end with him as Earth's main hero. After all, Super Chapter 103 has Goku saying that Gohan can now keep the planet safe after he's gone. So most likely that's foreshadowing. Still though, for as bright as his future is, it's yet to be seen if he'll make the most out of it going forward. Goku at his core is really just two things: a powerful martial artist and someone who defeats strong evildoers. Using that template, Gohan actually has a better track record than Luke. Skywalker would have to have restructured the Jedi Code, prevent the Order from being destroyed, and as well keep its members from turning to the dark side in order to surpass Yoda and Kenobi's examples. So pound for pound, Gohan has more points, to be honest. As for Miles Morales, again, when considering the main timeline of the comics, they just haven't done as much to justify his role as Peter's next in line compared to the movies and games. There are different parallel realities where, sure, Miles seems to be the only defender left, wall crawling and so forth, but I try to focus my purview again on the main universe, and 2099 is the next step of the main universe. It just keeps getting reiterated no matter how many times they retcon the present. So far, he honestly functions more so as a contemporary of Parker's that the heroes can call on. But still, look at the stories. Ben Reilly holding the title in a Nightfall John Paul Valley kind of way, and 2099, like I said, kind of just exists as a barrier canonically holding Miles as not having lived up to or surpassing Peter's legacy. Even in 1610, or the timeline Miles originated from, that version of Peter just put the red and blues back on in the absence of his would-be successor, seeing as he left that universe altogether. Unlike Spider-Verse or the Insomniac games, the comics haven't tested Miles to see if he really could hold down the fort for any period of time or establish him as Peter's inevitable heir apparent. Unlike you all know who. I've already made a video detailing Nightwing's potential as Batman's successor, as well as his overall competency compared to the Dark Knight. But even with all of that aside, it's hard to deny his role when the comics over the decades have made it so blatant. Not only has he literally been Batman 2 times over and even briefly filled out the cape and cowl for Bruce on occasion since then, but the very mantle of Nightwing just is the next step beyond the Caped Crusader. When it comes to the matter of who will be the next Dark Knight after Bruce, and even immediately, Nightwing is a better leader, comparable detective, equal martial artist, at least, and is an inspiration to the entire superhero community. Whether you subjectively agree with that, that's just what's been written within the fiction itself. If it was game or film Miles versus comic Nightwing in this department, I think it could be a true debate. But as far as main canon versus main canon, I think being around since 1940 and pretty much immediately having the promise of surpassing or taking Bruce's responsibilities one day, contrasted by just entering the main timeline in 2015, not even 10 years ago, justifies Grayson's place as the greatest successor. Now, this in no way means that any of these characters are objectively better than the other. That's not the point. I'm just presenting the case that when it comes to surpassing the respective goals of their predecessors, the original prodigal son did and continues to do it best. With all that said, check out my other videos on the end card as well as in my channel. I think there's something for everybody there. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.